My dad asked for rent on top of everything I already paid, then threatened to never let me come home if I moved out. "If you walk out that door," my dad said, "don't you dare come back." He said it quietly. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not loud, not explosive, just low and final, like a door being sealed from the outside. The voice of a man who had made a decision and considered the matter closed. I had a Honda CR-V idling in the driveway, loaded to the headrests, boxes of books, my dual monitors and laptop dock, my kitchen stuff, my weighted blanket, 6 years of carefully accumulated life. I had a lease, $1,300 a month, 2-bedroom townhouse in the Heights, community pool, walking trails, that I'd quietly signed 3 weeks prior, which meant I'd been preparing for this longer than any of them realized. And I had my 15-year-old brother, Marco, sitting on the edge of my now stripped mattress, pretending to scroll his phone, while his jaw worked in the silent way it does when he's trying not to cry. I looked at my dad for a long moment, long enough that he shifted his weight in the doorway. Then I picked up the last box. "Okay," I said. That was the entire conversation. That was 11 weeks ago. What happened in the weeks after? With my brother, with my parents, with the life I'd been quietly building while running someone else's household, is the thing I keep turning over at night. Not because it was dramatic, because it was clarifying, like someone finally switched the lights on in a room I'd been navigating in the dark for 3.5 years. How I got here. I graduated with a degree in applied mathematics from UT Austin at 22. Took a remote data analyst position at a mid-sized logistics firm. Decent base salary, solid growth trajectory, the kind of role that looks modest from the outside and compounds quietly on the inside. By 23, I was pulling $78,543 gross. I built SQL pipelines. I made dashboards that told operations teams what they didn't know they needed to know. I wore sweatpants to work and nobody cared because my numbers were good. When my parents offered the spare room after graduation, it made financial sense. Northwest Houston suburbs, 40 minutes from my college apartment. "Save money," my mom said. "Get yourself situated." I took it as a practical arrangement between adults. I knew I'd be contributing. I just didn't know how far that word would stretch. My dad, Ernesto, is a petroleum engineer on rotational rigs. 2 weeks offshore, 2 weeks home. When he's home, he fills the house with a particular gravitational weight. He's not cruel. He's not a bad man. He's a man raised in a culture that taught him the highest earner speaks first and loudest, and that a quiet house is a grateful one. He's spent his career in an industry where hierarchy keeps people alive, and he imported that hierarchy home without ever questioning whether it belonged there. My mom, Carmen, runs the household like a logistics operation. She's an ICU nurse, rotating shifts, physically brutal, emotionally draining. When she's not on a shift, she is managing schedules, grocery lists, Marco's orbit. She is capable and warm, and I would learn, capable of revising memory in real time with a steadiness that I still find difficult to fully comprehend. Marco is 15 now. He was 11 when I moved back in. Taekwondo, basketball, football, swimming, music lessons, weekly Dungeons & Dragons campaign. He is the kind of kid who processes the world through activity. Cut off his movement, he goes inward fast and hard. The moment I arrived back in that house, it was silently understood that I would help with his schedule. 4 to 7 p.m., 3 to 4 days a week, every week for 3 years. The bills were my mother's idea. 6 months into my stay, when the house hit a lean patch after my dad's minor rig injury, she asked if I could put the utilities in my name, temporarily. Electricity, water, gas, internet, 4 accounts, 4 auto-pay setups. I handed her the receipts. That was 3 years ago. Temporary never came up again. I didn't push it. By my second performance review, the bills ran somewhere between $480 and $560 a month, depending on the Houston summer. I thought of it as rent. I thought of it as my share. I thought we had an arrangement that both parties understood. That was my first mistake, assuming understanding. The week my dad watched me work. The first crack appeared in February. My dad came home from a rotation and, for reasons I still don't fully understand, decided to work from the kitchen table for a week instead of his home office, which meant 5 straight days of him having a direct line of sight to my desk and my screens. My working life is not visually dramatic. Coffee at 7:45, headphones on, SQL queries, reporting structures, Slack stand-ups, 2 or 3 meetings a day where I speak in acronyms. I also run a movie or show on my second monitor while I work. It's background noise. It helps me think. Every analyst and developer I've ever known does some version of this. My dad saw Netflix. He saw sweatpants. He saw me refill my coffee twice and close my laptop at 5:45 on a Wednesday. He didn't say a word, but I noticed him watching. I told myself it was adjustment. He came from an industry of hard hats and safety briefings and 12-hour shifts. Remote work probably looked like leisure to him. I told myself it would pass. 3 days later, he went into my room while I was driving Marco to Taekwondo. The document he wasn't supposed to find Marco told me in the car on the way home. "Dad was in your room?" he said, not looking up from his phone. My hands tightened on the wheel. "For a while," he added. "I heard him and Mom talking after." I got home and went straight to my desk. Nothing missing, nothing visibly disturbed, but the filing accordion between my desk and the wall, the cheap cardboard one I keep organized by category, was at a slightly different angle than I'd left it. I keep it in order: insurance, car documents, banking, tax documents. My W-2 is in the tax section. I pulled it out, looked at it. $78,343 gross. I set it back. I sat down. I told myself, he's a reasonable man. He'll see what I contribute. We'll have a conversation like adults. I went to bed at 10:30 p.m. He sat me down at 7:15 the next morning. You're not contributing anything. We need to talk about your finances, my dad said. Kitchen table, coffee in hand. The posture of someone who had rehearsed. My mom was at the stove, her back to us. You're making good money, he said. I am, I said, and you're not contributing to this household. The feeling wasn't a floor dropping out. It was slower than that, more like becoming aware that a tire has been losing air for miles. I looked at my mom's back. Mom, I said carefully, can you tell him about the bills, the arrangement we set up? She turned around, set the pan on the counter, and then she looked my father dead in the face, not flustered, not uncertain, and said, she doesn't give us anything. The room went very quiet. I need to be precise about this moment because I've turned it over in my mind hundreds of times. She did not stumble. There was no flicker, no discomfort. 3 years of utility bills, 3 years of auto pay receipts, 3 years of money that literally kept the water running and the lights on in that house. And she looked at him and said, I gave them nothing. My face went still. That's what happens when something hurts badly enough. I go very quiet and very still. Dad, I said, I pay the electric bill, the water bill, the gas bill, the internet bill, all 4, in my name, every month, for 3 years. I also drive Marco to every activity he has, 3 to 4 days a week. I've been doing that since I moved in. He looked at my mom. She looked at the pan. That's not what she said, he told me. I know, I said. The silence between us was its own sentence. You're paying $500 a month, he said. Starting the 1st, that's rent. And something went cold in my chest. Not rage, not yet. Something quieter and more permanent. If I'm paying rent, I said, I want a lease. I want the right to come and go as I please. And I'll be taking my name off the utility accounts. That's what rent covers. He called me petty. I told him I was being precise. He told me I wasn't thinking clearly. I excused myself and went to my room and sat on my bed and looked at my hands for a long time. They weren't shaking. I almost wished they were. What nobody counted. Lying in the dark that night, I kept thinking about the 2 years we don't talk about. March 2020, the world closed. My mom is an ICU nurse. When the hospital started filling, she made the decision to isolate herself in a hotel near the Texas Medical Center. 32 days at a stretch, then a week home, cycling in and out for months. She was terrified of bringing something back to us. I still respect that decision. My dad's rig went to an accelerated rotation. He was offshore more than he was home. That left me, Marco, who was 11, and Abuela Rosario, who was 73 and spoke almost no English. Marco's school went remote. I helped him with every subject, sat at the kitchen table for hours, fed him, kept the house running, kept him company during the silences that descended like weather, especially in the evenings, especially when the news was bad. He used to get a particular kind of quiet when he was overwhelmed, withdrawn and unreachable, and I learned how to wait it out and how to reach back in. He didn't just have a sister during those 2 years. He had someone who showed up. I never thought of it as something extraordinary. It was just what needed doing. I had never once factored it into any conversation about what I contributed. Nobody had. The negotiation and then the threat. 3 days after the confrontation, my mom came to my room. Not to explain, not to apologize, to deal. $750 a month. No change to utilities. My name would remain on all 4 accounts. I would continue driving Marco. I would continue my household chores. And, delivered with the energy of someone announcing a bonus clause, no male guests in my room. No noise past 9 p.m. Sunday through Thursday. I am 23 years old with a salary that could support a mortgage. Mom, I said. No, she exhaled. You're being unreasonable. Think about how much you're saving. I'm paying over $500 in bills, I said. I'm driving Marco 15 to 20 hours a week. Add $750 on top of that, and I'm paying over $1,200 a month for a bedroom with a curfew. I paused. That's more than the 2-bedroom I've already found. She looked at me. I've been looking for a while, I said. I started after the first conversation. She left without responding. My dad came in an hour later. The conversation dissolved into the kind of circular argument that leaves you scraped out. You're selfish. You don't care about this family. You're not thinking clearly. You're forgetting where you came from. At some point, I said it again, clearly without heat. I pay your electricity. I pay your water. I pay your gas. I pay your internet. I drive your son hundreds of miles a month through Houston traffic. And you looked me in the face and said I contributed nothing. His jaw went tight. And then he said it. If you leave this house, he said, don't expect to come back. I held his gaze for a long moment. Is that a threat or a promise? He walked out. I sat with what that meant for a long time after he left. It hurt. Of course it hurt. He's my father. But I recognized the structure of it. That line, "Don't come back," is designed to reframe leaving as abandonment, to make the person who walks out feel like the one causing the rupture. It's a manipulation, even when it isn't consciously intended as one. But underneath the hurt was something else. Something that had been accumulating quietly for months. Relief. Because he'd finally said out loud what the entire negotiation had implied all along. What they wanted from me couldn't be repaid with money or labor. It could only be repaid with compliance. And when I understood that, really understood it, the decision was simple. I opened my laptop and signed the lease, making it official, the paper trail. The morning after I signed, I called Lena Vasquez. Lena has been my closest friend since our sophomore year at UT. She's also a paralegal at a family law firm in Midtown, Shelton and Okafor, where she spent 4 years working primarily on housing disputes and family asset cases. She has the precise, calm demeanor of someone who has seen every version of this conversation before and knows exactly how it ends. The utility accounts, I said. Can they do anything if I transfer them out of my name? They're in your name, she said. You can close them. You can transfer them. You have zero legal obligation to maintain service for another adult's household indefinitely, especially with no written agreement. My dad might claim we had an understanding. In writing? No. Then it's a family arrangement with no legal standing. Courts don't enforce dinner table deals. She paused. Also, him entering your room and reading your tax documents without your consent. Technically, I know, I said. I'm not going that route. Okay, she didn't push. Send me anything you want me to look at. I gave notice on all 4 utility accounts that week. 4 calls, 4 transfer dates, all set to the 1st of the following month. 30 days notice to my parents. I sent them both a PDF with the account numbers, transfer dates, and the specific billing instructions for setting up new accounts. Lena reviewed the letter before I sent it. She said it was clear, professional, and entirely unassailable. Then she added, "Your dad is going to call this retaliation." He did. My mom called it vindictive. I forwarded them both the transfer confirmation emails and said nothing further. A week before I moved, I remembered something. Marco's school counselor, Ms. Teresa Rowe, M.Ed., who'd been at his middle school for 9 years and followed him into his current high school in a rare continuity arrangement, had left a voicemail for my mom 2 months prior about his mood and isolation. My mom had played it for me in passing, not thinking I'd remember it. "Marco has seemed withdrawn for the last several weeks," Ms. Rowe had said on the recording. "He's been isolating at lunch, and when I asked if anything was going on at home, he said things were kind of weird. I'd really love to connect with his parents about this." My parents called it teenage moodiness. I filed it. Moving day Saturday morning. The CRV loaded and running. Abuela Rosario pressed a tin of cookies into my hands at the door and held my face and said something in Spanish I understood to mean, "You were always the strong one." It was too much to ask. I don't know if she was right, but it hit me somewhere I wasn't expecting. My mom stood in the doorway watching me carry boxes. Each trip, a different version of "you're making a mistake." Marco carried every box I let him carry, without being asked. He didn't say much. When the car was full and I turned to go, he hugged me on the sidewalk for a long time. I felt him exhale against my shoulder. That specific exhale he does when he's been holding something in. "You'll be okay," I told him. "I know," he said. "I'm more worried about them." 15 years old. That sentence landed like a fist. My dad appeared in the doorway as I reached the car. We looked at each other across the front lawn, the length of a life of something unsaid between us. He didn't speak. Neither did I. I backed out of the driveway and drove away. The call that changed everything. The first 3 weeks in my townhouse were a revelation in ordinary form, my own coffee maker quiet. I set up my office the way I'd always imagined it. Left dishes in the sink overnight without bracing for commentary. Worked with Netflix on the second monitor, and nobody watched me through a doorway and decided I was useless. Then my phone rang at 4:17 p.m. on a Wednesday, 26 days after I moved out. Not Marco's number, the landline, the one my parents keep for Abuela, who distrusts cell phones. "I can't breathe," Marco said. He was in the upstairs bathroom, locked door. My dad was home but didn't understand what was happening. Marco's voice had that shallow cycling quality I recognized, not from clinical training, but from memory. 2 years of COVID evenings. I knew the sound. "Sit down," I said. "Phone on speaker. Breathe with me. In for 4. I talked him through it while I put on shoes. 14 minutes to the house. 2 yellow lights. My dad was at the foot of the stairs when I walked through the door he'd told me not to come back through. He looked at me. I walked past him and went upstairs. Marco opened the bathroom door after 7 minutes. He sat down on the hallway floor. I sat next to him. His hands were cold. When he finally talked, he said this. My dad had texted him at school, in the middle of the day, to say he needed to prioritize his activities because the driving wasn't working out. Swimming would have to go. Maybe basketball too. 3 years of me sitting in parking lots on 610 and 4 p.m. p.m. Houston heat, all those Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturday mornings, and it had collapsed into a text message inside 26 days. What else? I said. He looked at the ceiling. When I told him I was stressed, he said I needed to be more independent. He paused. Ms. Rowe emailed them again. Mom said she'd handle it. A beat. She didn't. I looked at my hands. Do you want to come stay with me for a while? I said. He looked at me. Can I? Yes. He exhaled. And in that single breath, I heard the release of however many days he'd been holding himself together alone. The professional word for what I'd been doing that night. Marco on my couch with pizza, still in his practice clothes, watching something on my laptop. I called Dr. Priya Nambiar. Dr. Nambiar is a licensed adolescent and family therapist I'd found through my company's employee assistance program 3 weeks prior. She had been at Houston Methodist's behavioral health department for 11 years before moving to private practice. Calm, precise, the kind of therapist who makes you slow down when you're skating over something important. I'd made my own appointment partly to process the move, partly because I wanted an outside perspective on what I was carrying and whether that weight was normal. I told her what had happened with Marco. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what you're describing, the panic response, the attachment history, the regression, it's consistent with anxiety triggered by disrupted relational stability. During the COVID period you described, when you were effectively the primary adult in his daily life, that's not a small thing developmentally. That kind of secure attachment doesn't dissolve. It gets activated when it's disrupted. He's 15, I said. 15-year-olds feel things at full volume, she said. What he's experiencing is real, and it makes complete sense given what you've told me. She agreed to see him. She also referred him to Dr. James Osei at Texas Children's Hospital, board-certified adolescent psychiatrist, 17 years of practice, specialist in anxiety and developmental disruption, for a formal evaluation. Make the appointment, she said. And in the meantime, let him talk. Don't fix. Just be there. I sat with that phrase for a long time after I hung up. Just be there. The professional recommendation, as it turned out, was the thing I'd been doing for 3.5 years. The collapse, they didn't announce. My parents didn't call it staying. They called it visiting. My mom texted me on day 3 to ask when Marco would be back. I said I'd keep her updated. He stayed. On day 8, she called me, not angry, something I didn't have an exact word for, quieter than sad, more stunned than upset, like she'd reached for something and found empty space. He won't come home, she said. He's safe, I said. He's going to school. He's been to every practice this week. That's not what I asked. The pause between us was long. Mom, I said. He had a panic attack, a real one. I broke traffic laws getting to that house. I waited a beat. Through the door, Dad told me never to come back through. Silence. Did you know he was struggling? I thought he was being difficult, she said, very quietly. He's not being difficult. He's anxious. He's been anxious for a long time. Ms. Rowe has been trying to reach you for months. No response. He has an appointment with Dr. Nambiar in 6 days, I said, and with Dr. James Osei at Texas Children's after that. I made both. I heard her exhale. It sounded like something deflating slowly and finally. Why didn't he come to us? She said. I wanted very much not to say the next thing, but I think I owed it to both of us. Mom, I said, you told Dad I gave you nothing. 3 years of bills, 3 years of driving Marco all over this city, and you looked him in the face and said nothing. I let it land. If you could do that, what did Marco think would happen if he came to you with something inconvenient? The line was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice had changed, become very small. I think I lost my children, she said. Not dramatic, not fishing for reassurance. Someone doing math out loud that they'd been avoiding for a long time. You haven't, I said, but you need to understand what happened. My dad in the parking lot. My dad called twice in the weeks that followed. The first call was short and hard-edged. He wanted Marco home. I was enabling avoidance. I was interfering in their parenting. I told him Marco had a therapist appointment the following week, and I'd send him the outcome. He hung up. The second call came at 9:20 on a Tuesday night. He said with no preamble, I drove him to everything today. I waited. Swimming, then taekwondo. Then I sat in a parking lot on 610 for 45 minutes. In 5 o'clock traffic. I said nothing. Then swimming again. I waited. You did this every week, he said. 3 to 4 days a week, I said. For 3 years. A long pause. I didn't know, he said. I know you didn't. Another silence. I still think you should have been paying rent, he said. I know you do, I said. But, he stopped. Started again. I shouldn't have said you weren't contributing. From my father, a man for whom admitting error is the structural equivalent of load-bearing wall removal, this was an excavation. It cost him something. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. He never apologized for don't come back. Maybe he doesn't remember saying it. Maybe he's not ready. I'm not waiting on it. I've stopped building my life around things I'm waiting for from that that house. Dr. Osie's report. 3 weeks after I made the appointment, Dr. James Osie, pediatric psychiatrist, board-certified Texas Children's Hospital, completed Marco's evaluation. The summary, which Marco shared with me because he's that kind of kid: moderate generalized anxiety with situational triggers related to disruption of relational stability, consistent with adolescents who experienced prolonged periods of caregiver inconsistency during early developmental years, compounded by subsequent loss of established support structures. The treatment recommendation: consistent therapeutic relationship, structured routine, and what Dr. Osei called relational constancy, the ability to reliably depend on the same people, across time, without uncertainty. I read that phrase 3 times. Relational constancy. I'd apparently been providing it for 3.5 years. Nobody had noticed it was happening until I stopped. 11 weeks later. My townhouse has a reading corner now. Armchair, lamp, the kind of silence I choose rather than inherit. I make coffee in the morning and sit in it and think about whatever I want, which is a freedom that sounds ordinary and isn't. Marco has been with me for 7 of the 11 weeks. He's back to all 5 of his activities. Dr. Nambiar described him in their 3rd session as cautiously rebuilding trust in his relational support network. Clinical language for, he's starting to believe people will stay. He's also started cooking scrambled eggs every morning. He's weirdly proud of them, and he should be. Last week, he held the door for an elderly woman at the grocery store and said after you, "Ma'am," like it was the most natural thing in the world. I did that. Not alone, but I did that. My parents are in couples therapy now. I found out from Abuela Rosario, who called me on a Sunday afternoon and cried a little and said she always knew I was my grandfather's favorite. I'm still not entirely sure what to do with that, but it made me smile. My mom texts me every few days, sometimes logistics about Marco, sometimes a recipe, sometimes just a check-in with no agenda. I answer all of them. I'm not at war with my parents. I'm not interested in punishment, but I'm not going back either. Not to the room, not to the arrangement, not to the invisible labor and the buried contribution and the family story where I gave them nothing. I gave them the lights. I gave them the water. I gave them the gas that heated the house in January. I gave them the internet my dad used to watch me through the doorway and decide I was worthless. And I drove their son through Houston traffic 4 days a week, 3 years running, and he grew into a person who says "after you, ma'am" to strangers, and does box breathing when he's overwhelmed, and makes scrambled eggs for both of us in the morning with a spatula I bought at Target the week I moved in. I did that. My dad said don't come back. He was wrong about what that would cost him. He was wrong about a lot of things. But the thing he was most wrong about, it wasn't me he was threatening. It was himself.